and then you start finding equivalents by looking at glossaries, comparable texts, of course, which in some cases is the only way that you're going to find them if it's a new research. Sometimes you have to guess what the translation could be and Google it and see if you're lucky, and sometimes you are. So there are different ways that students can explore as well in order to find what they need. So we go through different types of sources of documentation, from encyclopedias, textbooks, journals. Abstracts are useful because sometimes we have key terms at the end, published glossaries, and then of course the internet, meta crawlers that search for information in different search engines, Lingui, a translator search engine. I think the more ammunition we give to the students so that they can find the meaning of terms, they can find equivalents and so on, the better, because they need that in order to become more autonomous and to be able to cope with different types of problems. And then, of course, introduce them to IATE, the European, well, this is a Wikimind map that I show the students. Well, this is just for fun, but they like it very much. And sometimes they say, well, you know, if you want to kind of to create a conceptual tree or something like that could be interesting. Obviously, then you have to start researching. Apart from that, this is not the, but they like it. It's good fun. And then terminology management, obviously, is the process of documentation, storage, manipulation, presentation of that specialized vocabulary. And it is important that you manage your terminology, you manage your glossaries well, that they are up to date, that they are, again, consistent, because then you have half of the work is done. I mean, if you have a good glossary, then you can do translations fairly quickly. If your CAT tools have a good terminological database, multi-term, and so on, again, your translation is going to speed up considerably. And again, for the purposes of the students, the terminology management that we do is descriptive. Basically, we are observing terms, we are capturing the terms that are in use, and then we are kind of managing them, storing them for use, and so on. Terminology management systems. I think it is important, again, to introduce CAT tools in MA courses and even undergraduate courses for translators and interpreters, because that is nowadays what everybody is using. We heard it this morning as well from a freelance translator. You have to have at least some familiarization with these. I think it was Jenny that mentioned that. I mean, we do actually teach our students to use Trados and multi-term as well, and I think it is very important, but not just to include the training separate from what the students are doing. I mean, once our students are familiar with Trados, they have to run a project using Trados, and it's a simulation project. They are sent an authentic text that we get from one of our partners, and the students are put in groups, and they create their own mini companies. They have a name for the company, a logo. They have to work out in groups of 4 or 5 who's going to be the project manager, who are going to be the translators, the revisers, who's going to do the final QA. So we try to do the project as real as possible within a simulation, and they have to use CAT tools. And we also introduce some graphics or some photographs and so on. and but it's in a protective environment. So if they come across lots of problems with traders, at least they know that there's going to be someone there, the trainer, going to give them a hand, so that they don't feel completely lost. And if they mess up within the academic community. You're there to help them. They also learn from their mistakes, and they come out much more confident. And I think that's very good. So, and then we introduce IATE as well, the terminology, just for them to have a look and use a big institutional database. And again, it gives sort of lots of information on lots of languages. And some of you would say, oh well, but Chinese is not included in there. Well, actually, it doesn't matter, because when you search for a term and you include the domain and so on, and then you click on search, and then you get sort of the information with the terms, with the equivalents, and then lots of stars that is telling you if it's more reliable or less reliable, and so on and so forth. And then you can click on them as well, and then you get the definition. So even if you don't have the Chinese equivalent, you get a definition, yeah? And you get sort of some idea of the reliability of that definition. And in some cases, you got references as well, references that you can go to afterwards to read more, and it's a way of picking up comparable texts and so on and so forth. So it's a good way of starting to build up your own glossaries. By the way, the Terminology for Europe, IATE, is quite interested in hearing from universities that where students do or carry out terminological work. So if your students are building glossaries in different domains, they would like to actually have a look at those glossaries, because then they can add new terms to the database and so on. So it's a good thing to get in touch with them as well for that purpose. And just to finish very quickly, obviously terminology is not just important for the field of translation, but is very, very important more and more in computational linguistics as well. And it is influenced obviously by specialized domains, because terminology is bound to special languages, but also special languages benefit a lot from terminology in terms of regularization and standardization and so on and so forth. And there are so many linked domains to terminology nowadays, from marketing communications. Again, corporate terminology is becoming more and more important, because large corporations are realizing that they need to have a consistent terminology for not only for their products, but also for their marketing image. And lots and lots of big multinationals are actually employing terminologists to create this corporate terminology as well. And of course, in computer-aided construction and all sorts of different fields now are actually looking for linguists. Finally, they have realized that they cannot really advance very much just with algorithms and things like that, without having some kind of linguistic know-how behind it. And of course, when they start extracting terminology automatically, and I'm doing some work on this with a group of people, the IT people, they can extract automatically. We don't need you, we can extract all this information automatically. And then it's full of noise and it's not very reliable. As soon as you say, well, actually, I would leave those terms because they're not really important for this particular domain. What about including sort of compounds? And what about including these collocations? And once they put those algorithms, then, oh, it goes from 20% to 60%. And they think it's magic. Well, it's not magic. It's linguistics applied to this thing. It's good terminology management. So, so we are kind of wizards for these people. Yeah. So applications of terminology, again, term mining from corpus, glossary building, work with electronic health records, with those meta thesaurus in medical and sort of machine translation. Also for media, social media data, we've done a little sort of work as well, extracting information from Twitter of what were the trends. Yeah. So now when people say it's trending, well, it's behind. There is all these big dictionaries actually trying to kind of hone in on all these terms that are repeated and by frequency and so on. But there are quite a lot of linguistics as well behind those data research. So I think terminology is becoming more and more important, and if translators are well versed in terminology, if they can use it for their own benefit and for capture tools as well, I think we will be doing our students a good service, really, in terms of their development as translators, but also in terms perhaps of branching out into different research fields. And there is training in terminology available on the web. The Pavel terminology tutorial, well, it's now obsolete, but it's still really good, and it's free, and you can sort of download it, and I'll certainly ask my students to do the course. There is also the International Network for Terminology, Termnet, and there are courses, training for students and for translators. There are usually, it's a one-week training, usually in July, either in the University of Cologne or the University of Vienna. I did the terminology course a few years ago, very interesting again. So I think if you want to introduce a module in terminology, this is something that you should consider doing, or if you are a student, it will be very interesting for you as well to do this course as an add-on to your MA. And that's it.
We won't have time to ask questions because the drinking reception will start at 6 o'clock in the other building, and it will take about 10 minutes walk. So for those of you who haven't been to Patswood building, let's say we meet in, I know some of you need to go back perhaps to your room to get your jacket or your coat. So let's say we meet 45 to 6. So down there. So I might go first with someone. If you want to go directly to Patswood building, you can go with me. And then I will leave Ife there to wait for you, for the rest of you, yeah, that's over there, to walk to Patswood building. And the drinking reception is in Oscar, just after my office that house.